James chapter 2. We should be in chapter 3 today, but James chapter 2, folks. James chapter 2. It's good to see everyone out this morning. Good to see have some folks back that have been away, and of course we have some others that are away. Shocking, not. It seems like every weekend we've got people traveling, but we're glad that the Cations are back with us, and that Ann is back with us for the summer. So we'll take advantage of that. Before we get into our Bible study this morning, I'm going to ask Dustin, if you would, to lead us in an opening word of prayer, and then we'll get started. Dustin?
Heavenly Father, we come to you now for another day that you bless us with, another time to be amongst fellow Christians and study your word. Pray, dear God, that all we do today is pleasing to you. Pray that as we look into your word, the lessons that are taught, we truly open our hearts and our minds to those things, apply them to our lives, so that when we go out into this world, we will be an example to those around us and spread your word. Dear God, and bring other souls to you. Holy Father, we pray that you give those who are not with us today, those that are traveling, those that are going through physical ailments or suffering spiritually. We just ask for those obstacles and remove them and back to us. That you give us the remainder of this service. Always things in Christ's name.
Amen. Okay. Well, I knew we wouldn't get through this section last week, even though we read it. We had a really good discussion, obviously on faith and works, which is what this second half of the chapter dealt with. But there's a number of things that we didn't get through. In just a few moments, we'll probably finish up 24 through 26. But one of the things that we didn't even get into last week, well, there's a number of things we didn't get into. We were just in verse 19, for example, when we're talking about faith and works, and it mentioned, you believe there is one God, you do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. You know, it makes for a good sermon that you would want people to believe at least as much as what the demons believe. And what do they believe? They believe in God. What else do they believe?
They know his power.
Believe in Jesus. What do you mean by that, Janet?
Well, if they're trembling, I think they would have fear.
So they understand punishment. They understand accountability, right? I mean, you don't tremble if there's nothing to be trembling about. They know what's coming in anticipation. The trembling is knowing what is going to happen. You know, these basic fundamentals, it makes for a good sermon. You just wish people would believe as much as the demons would believe. But unfortunately, if people did believe as much as the demons believe, is everything fine? Well, obviously not, because he's talking about, well, why did he bring them up to begin with? What was the point of bringing them up? The demons. Why bring them up? Why did James bring them up? Because he's saying, he used them as an example of saying, look, if just believe will work, well, the demons believe. And it's not going to work for them. Why? Because they faith without works is dead, and that was the whole subject. We got down that far last week. Let me continue on. We already read through it, but we didn't cover everything. So then he, of course, brought up Abraham in verse 21. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? Remember the big chart that we had written on the board last week, and we were talking about how people will put more of an emphasis on one than the other. And the danger of emphasizing the works is what? What's the danger of emphasizing works? That you're saving yourself, that you can earn your salvation, right? That's the danger of emphasizing that too much. If you emphasize just the faith too much, then you're emphasizing, I don't have to do anything. You know, that alone is going to suffice. If you don't have that balance, and that's why he mentioned earlier in this, in verse 18, someone will say, you have faith, I have works. Show me your faith without your works. I will show you my faith by my works. And so by your fruits you shall know them. So it needs to be demonstrated, folks. And so there needs to be that consistency in our lives. And that's what he's bringing up here, talking about Abraham. So was he telling... So here's the danger. People look at this and, well, Abraham was justified by works. Was he? The passage said he was justified by works. Now, how did he get justification through his works? Think about Abraham.
He had faith that God told him what to do, and then he would do it.
That's exactly right. And so the works is connected with the faith, because did Abraham just say, you know what, I'm going to show God how much I love him. I'm going to go and sacrifice my son. Did he do that? He sure didn't. He didn't come up with that on his own. He didn't come up, but what do people come up with on their own? So I love God. What am I going to? Man, I'm going to put this band together, and we're going to sing praises in church, and we're going to entertain people, because we're just going to do this for the Lord. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You got a lot of works there. But without the faith, and where does faith come from? Hearing the Word of God. See, people just seem to think that, I'm putting this band together, and we're going to praise God and worship. We're going to do this, and I do believe in God. So they say faith and works are there. Wrong. The faith that we're talking about is with Abraham. Abraham just didn't do this idea that, I believe in God, and I'm just going to sacrifice my son to him to show him how much I love him and how much faith I have in him. No. You're sacrificing your son because God told you to do that. And now you're demonstrating it. And so with us, this is what people are missing in the religious realm, is because they don't understand that faith comes by hearing the Word of God, and faith without works is dead. And so you can be a student of the Word and not practice it. Okay? You can practice it, but you're not doing it, with faith. You can make up things, all right, which is dangerous, and that's what he's talking about here with Abraham. And I don't think we could stress that enough, that Abraham was justified by works because he did what he was told. It's as simple as that. And so from there, he mentioned he offered him on the cross. Verse 22, do you see that faith was working together with his works, and by works, faith was made perfect? So, what do we need for our faith to be perfect?
Works and faith together.
They have to be, don't they, Janet? You have to be, which reminds me of James chapter 1. This is a problem when you go verse by verse. You forget what we talked about a month ago. In James chapter 1, it talked about the danger of just being a hearer. Right? What did he say? What did James say? You not only be a hearer, but what? A doer. See, a hearer of what? God's word. And what should that produce within you? Faith. Right? So you're hearing it. It produces faith within you because God said it. And then you need to be a doer of it. James is really, what he's mentioned in chapter 1 is what he's talking about here. He's just expanding on it. Because people fail to understand, you need to be a hearer, you need to be a doer of it. Faith without works is dead. They need to be coupled together. And that's what he mentions here in verse 21 and verse 22. Verse 23, the scriptures was fulfilled, which says, Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness, for he was called a friend of God. This is so important for us to understand that if you're a righteous person, what is the difference between a righteous person, if you're a righteous person, and a self-righteous person? This is crucial. This is what we're talking about here. What's a self-righteous person? Is it born?
Well, I don't know. Somewhere in this line of discussion, we need to have the word obedient. So if it's not obedient to God's word,
right,
it's a separate thing. Right. We know that we believe that our faith is justified by baptism. We've expressed our belief in God. And it's done all the things necessary. But we have to do something. We have to do that.
Right.
And just like whatever thing is going on, works is tied to obedience.
Right. Always. I mean, a person, you could actually word it that way. If a person has faith without works, are they obedient? No. We tell people, you're not being obedient to God. You talk about somebody that's faltering in their faith, and they're not being faithful to the Lord. You're wanting them to understand that you're not being obedient. But the problem is that they'll go, well, I'm being obedient in this area, and area. And that's what Warren was talking about. Yeah, the prerequisites to baptism, and then, of course, once you do submit and you are baptized, are your works done?
No.
Your whole life is spent because now that you're walking in the faith, right? You're walking in the light. You've received that faith that's been once delivered. You spend the rest of your life with the faith in the works. And so what does it mean, guys, logically, if your faith is increasing?
Your work should increase.
They have to. They have to. If your faith is increasing towards God in your duties, and so you can say that, my faith is getting stronger, so I am being a better husband than I have been before. See, it's being demonstrated. I'm a better wife. I'm a better parent. I'm a better citizen. A member of the congregation. Your faith is growing. Your works are growing. And a person that is not demonstrating that, they're fooling themselves. And that's what he's warning here. Don't be deceived. How many times have we read that, right? Don't be deceived. People are being deceived that they're okay. That everything is fine. And what this chapter is doing is defining for us what's acceptable to God. Right? What's acceptable to God, because people want to create their own standard. It's so, I told you, this is like a great chapter. I'm glad I wasn't out of town.
So what was the answer? You said,
Go ahead.
you said self-righteous and righteous. What was the answer?
Oh, let's get back to that. How do you describe, who's a self-righteous person? Be turning to, so I want somebody to turn to Romans chapter 10 for me. And I want you to read the first 3 verses. Whoever gets there, just read it. Romans 10, first 3 verses.
Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they may be saved. For I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, and seeking to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted to the righteousness of God.
Now, do you notice that it kept using the word righteous? So you got the righteousness of man and the righteousness of God. That's what we were talking about here. And so a self-righteous person not only is an arrogant person. A person can be doing the right thing and be arrogant about it. But what I wanted to bring out in this was the Romans 10 passage, is that a self-righteous person is the person who's saying, I'm righteous because I say so. I'm self-righteous. He used it in here, and that's why we read on here in James. Wasn't getting too far ahead of myself, but when he was talking about this righteousness, you and I are to be righteous. But our righteousness is determined by God and not determined by us. That's the point, Janet.
Well, that's what I was going to say. They're the standard of man's righteousness versus the standard of God's righteousness.
Yeah. Well, you guys were just talking before services, right? Dress and things like that. The world has a standard of righteousness. The denominational realm has a standard of righteousness. There's no question. There's a religious realm out there, right? I mean, we're religious. But the point is, in the religious realm, there is a standard of righteousness. They've created their own comfort zone. We'll do this, but we won't do that. Every group that's out there, you might say, these guys are way out there. But the most way out there group you can imagine, do they have limitations? They put limitations on themselves. We'll do this, but we're not going to do this. See that? Everybody has their standard, is the point. What's our standard? That's it. It has to be. It has to be our standard because of the danger of establishing our own. Mark.
So I think it's been pointed out many times, but you know that once we start to deviate from the Bible, that today that standard may be this, but tomorrow it will be this, it will be something else. And over time we evolve. I mean, we have religious groups now that they started out with just small changes, small deviations. Now they're not what they do and how they're organized doesn't even approximate what we do.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Mark. I mean, I just want, even though it's in our text, I just want us to keep this before us because we want to do the will of God. There's no question. But as Mark was talking about, and we can't preach enough about this, about the dangers of drifting. We cannot preach enough about that. parenting. Obviously, we are so very, very, I wrenched my back the other day. We're so very, very strict. The reason we're doing that is because if we're not, what happens to the next generation? And Mark just said it. Whatever you loosen up, their next standard, they're going to be a little loose, and then a little loose. That's just the way it is. And so if you can establish that strictness as far as according to what is right and toe the line on this, and people can criticize us for saying, man, you guys are just so strict on things. Well, what are they implying? Yeah, as if it would be okay not to be. Right? That's what they're saying. You guys are so strict. Now, can we be guilty of making the narrow road more narrower than it already is? How? How could you make it more narrower than it already is? But keep in mind what we've been studying. Making laws that don't exist. Right? That's what it is. You're making it more narrow than it already is. And so this is what happens with the loose thinking. Because the loose thinking is, you're loosening it. You're widening the road. And we don't want to be guilty of doing that either. And so, again, you see with Abraham how it was demonstrated. He was considered a friend of God because there it is in verse 23 we mentioned. It was accounted to him for righteousness. And I'm going to tell you, none of us here are going to be considered righteous without this. You can't. Can't be that alone. Can't be that alone. Can't be. Janet?
Well, and both of those together is complete. It's one without the other. It's not complete.
Yeah. I remember doing a sermon a long time ago, Janet, that it was entitled "Things You Can't Separate," and that was one of them. I used the premise where God is joined together, let no man separate. And I remember this was one of the points. I'm trying to be a multiple tasker thinker while I'm doing this, trying to remember the other 7 points. But there are things in the Bible you can't separate them, even though you will try to do that. And this is one of them. And just because the Bible says let not man separate, does that mean man can't separate? Well, they're doing it. They're doing it. But they think it's helping them, but it's really not. So I hope that helped you, Josh, to understand that self-righteousness that's out there. And people might accuse those who are towing the line as a bunch of self-righteous people over there. Because when you are standing for what is right, can you stand for something without standing against?
No.
But political correctness says you need to do that. Go ahead and stand for whatever you want, Chuck, but don't say they're wrong. Right? That's political correctness. That doesn't exist within the truth we read within the scriptures. Because when you stand for the truth, you're against everything else. Therefore, I hate every false way, is what the Bible teaches. So you got to stand against. You got to point the finger. You have to expose. That's what light does. Light exposes darkness, and you can't apologize for that. If light and flame, you just can't. I know it's ridiculous, but the flame is not like, oh, I'm apologizing. I'm lighting things up around here. Well, no, because it exposes it. And we don't want to apologize for that. We don't want to be rude. We don't want to be unloving, because that gets us back to this idea. Does the Bible teach about love? Yes. Should you demonstrate your love? Yes. So let's not be cold and callous and hateful and spiteful. Right? We don't want that. This subject obviously covers everything that the Bible talks about. We're just talking about the general principle that you have to have authority, and Warren's talking about you need to be obedient. That's all it is. This isn't rocket science. But man chooses to establish their own. That's all. And they'll say, that's your opinion. James is nailing it. This is not in the opinion area. You must abide in the doctrine of Christ, 2 John 9. You don't have any choice in it. Because if you don't abide in the doctrine of Christ, you don't have God. 2 John 9. And so then he gets to this powerful passage here, and we often quote, verse 24. You see that a man is justified by works and not by faith only. How terrible it is for somebody to read this passage and says, you see, a man is justified by works only. That would be horrible. That's not his point. You are not justified by works only. But his point is when people think they can be. You see that a man is justified by works and not by faith only. He's coupling them. You're not justified by this without that. You can't be justified. And you guys know the word justification means? Thank you. And so that's it. You want to be guiltless. And the only way you can be guiltless, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Because I remember I talked with Sandy after services in the morning. And talking about, well, am I sinless? Am I sinlessly perfect? Well, I'm striving to grow and sin less. That doesn't mean that you cannot be sitting in the pew right now. It better not be. I hope that you're not sitting in the pew sin-stained. Person says, well, I'm sinless at this moment in the sense where, remember we talked about when somebody comes up under the waters of baptism, you don't say, welcome to God's family, you sinner. Well, no, their sins are washed away, right? And if you guys have prayed to God, like I have prayed to God, and we've asked for forgiveness of sin, are you sin-stained? No. So you are going to go from that moment on determined, because you repented, to sin less, right? To not do that again, and I'm going to grow. So you can be in that sinless, but what John was talking about to say that if you say you have no sin, you're a liar and the truth's not within you, to say that you're perfect, no, but you should be sitting in your seat saying, I'm perfect now, in the sense where I'm not sin-stained. That's the key. We need to have that conscience clean. You need to be justified, not by faith only. Look what he said in verse 25. Likewise, was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way? She believed in God, she understood what was going on, and she acted upon it. That's all it is, guys. Faith without works is dead. And that's what he says right here in verse 20. Whereas the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. And we've exhausted the subject. Not too much, but we've exhausted this subject. What did you learn about the body and the spirit in verse 26? What do you learn about the body and the spirit?
Body without the spirit is dead.
So, what do you learn about them?
Yeah.
Okay, expand. Tell me about the body and tell me about the spirit. First, tell me about the body.
It's earthly.
Well, from the text. The text is telling you that the body needs the spirit to what? What do you learn about the spirit?
It needs the body.
Does the spirit need the body to live?
No.
No. It doesn't. It doesn't. And I got it. Trust me, no, it doesn't. Doesn't. Okay. It doesn't need the body to live. Okay, let's get that. Wow. So what does that tell you about the spirit? Yeah. The body without the spirit. So if a person dies, you would say what? If there's a body there that's dead, you'd say what? Spirit's gone. That's all you'd say. The spirit is not within them. How do you know? Because they're dead. See, because if they're alive, the spirit would be with them, because the body without the spirit is dead. You need your spirit to live. Okay? You need it, because I know you all have your soul, the spirit is within you right now. Okay? Because you're alive. You're breathing. Once you die, spirit's gone. Now, the body without the spirit is dead. The body dies, but the spirit continues to go on. Now, I'm not going to get into a big study about that. I have to deal with it on the radio program today. A person asked a question about what do we believe, I got through our website, what do we believe about sleeping spirits? And the reason why they use that term, and I'll just throw this out there, and we'll get going. The sleeping spirit is when Paul talked about those who have fallen asleep, they fail to understand that that's talking about when they die. And they literally take it as, oh no, they're just sleeping. So the spirit They believe after you die, the spirit is just sleeping until judgment day. Okay, that's way out there. Anyways, so you go, the body without the spirit is dead. So that's a fact. There's no question. As certain as we know that if there's a dead body there, there's no spirit, we can be just as certain that faith without works is dead. It's dead. It's called a dead faith. You can have a dead faith. What is a dead faith? A faith that, going back to Warren's word. What kind of faith do we need? An obedient faith. That's all we say. John 3:16. For God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish, but have everlasting life, right? So all you got to do is believe in Him. But whenever I have somebody read that passage or somebody reads it to you, what will you ask them? You'll say, what kind of belief is that? And they'll look at you like, what? I said, if you believe, you won't perish. So all you got to do is believe. Say, well, what kind of belief is that? They fail to understand that there's such thing as a dead belief, and there's such thing as an active, obedient faith.
You go back to the demons. The demons, what's the difference? You have the same belief that they have.
That's exactly right. Remember, they believe. Mr.
Just in this passage, Abraham's works seem equated with belief.
Yes. It's like we said before, you just can't separate them. Anybody that you read about the Old Testament, all those great men of faith in Hebrews chapter 11, can you think of any of those great men of faith that were talked about that weren't talked about because of things that they did? Wouldn't it be silly to talk about some great man of faith that didn't do anything? We just said, oh, remember Jim? Remember Fred's great faith? What do you mean? Every one of them demonstrated what they did. What they did. Misty?
Let me understand socially, if somebody talks a big talk, but there's nothing to support it, people forget that person. But yet religiously, we want to talk a big talk and not really do anything about it.
That's the truth. It happens all the time. And this is an eye-opener for me, for all of us. Because we need to say to ourselves, what kind of faith do I have? What kind of faith do I have? You know, I can sit in my apartment, or I can sit at my home, I can sit anywhere, and tell people, you know, I have faith. Great. Even the demons believe. Now, we're not belittling the importance of that. Okay. We're not belittling the importance of having faith. We need to understand it. You know what? If there's no works there, it's a dead faith, and you're not making it. You're not making it to heaven. You're not pleasing to God. You're not being righteous. And so if your faith is growing, you're demonstrating that aspect also. Read the qualifications of the elders in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1. You look at those qualifications and you tell me, can a person just wake up one day and say, I'm qualified? What has been going on? They have been growing, haven't they? Their faith has been increasing, and so they have been growing. So their reputation within and without the congregation, they've been showing that over time he has been raising his children well. He's been showing that he's not greedy for money. All right, I mean the list goes on and on and on. They are demonstrating that, and so you have to be growing. So if your faith is increasing, guess what, guys? Married, as your faith increases, someday you can reach to the point where you're going to be qualified to be an elder. But you're not going to be if your faith is not increasing. Because faith and works go together. It's as simple as that. It's pretty powerful stuff when you stop and think about it. So anyways, I know we talked about it last week, but we finished it up. But does anybody have any other comments before we go into... Well, and you know we're not finishing this morning. The dangers of the tongue. Misty, go ahead.
I just find it interesting when he's talking to these Jews and talks about Abraham, that out of all the other characters, he picks Rahab, who wasn't even born Jew.
Right. Exactly. It just goes to show you that it's like, you know, somebody might be reading Hebrews 11 and going, well, you know, there was kind of special people, you know. It's like we can't even relate to them. Why can't we relate to them? Why can't we relate to? We should be able to. I mean, was Moses larger than life? Was Abraham larger than life? Abraham never did anything right. Never did anything wrong. Really? Well, that's my sister. It's like, there's just a lot of things that they were human like us, but what did they have? They had a faith that was active. That's what made them stand out. And for you and I, it's no different because you are standing out as a person, hopefully, that is walking by faith. Misty.
And even today, she's still known by her sinful occupation.
Yeah.
I mean, she's called in this verse as the harlot.
That's what she did. Okay? That's what she did. And it goes to show you how people can rise above that. People can change. Right? Let's not forget that. And not sell ourselves short. Again, too many people make excuses. I can't. I'm going to tell you something. If you keep saying I can't, you're basically saying I won't increase my faith. I won't. Because that's all it is. That's all it is. Person says I can't. No, you won't. Now you might not be able to do that now. You get this new convert getting, Steve obeyed the gospel. We pull him up with a word. Hey, you're preaching next Sunday. I wouldn't do that to him. That'd be horrible. You're not there yet, okay? But you can grow. And so let's see that. It's so vital that we apply these principles, guys. We're not just learning this like a history class. Well, this is what James taught back then, and we're just learning. Has anybody memorized the first 2 chapters so far? And you quiz me on these verses. Okay, yeah, but what does it mean, and how does it apply to you? That's the key, Dave.
Is belief enough to save you? Well, in Mark 16:16, it says, "He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who believes not will be condemned."
Right.
So there's more to believe to be saved than just belief alone.
Yeah. Anytime somebody, we talk about that passage, because that's a passage they'll raise to say all you need is belief. Surprisingly, I was one of those guys because of that group. I would quote Mark 16:16 because I would say, "He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. He that believeth not shall be condemned." And they'll say, "Well, why didn't he say, he that believeth not and is not baptized won't be saved?" Why didn't he say that, right? So they go to that particular passage, and I just say, look, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it simple. You read the passage, it says, "He that believeth and is baptized will be saved. He that does not believe will be lost." Okay, so will be condemned. So I asked 3 questions. What does the passage teach saves you? What does the passage teach that will cause you to be condemned? Not believe. Which one do you want? It's simple. What do you want? Which one do you want? Well, I want to believe only. Well, that's not the question. The passage is teaching us some fundamentals here that talks about faith and works. Be obedient, an active obedient faith. Now, if you don't have faith, why would you even think about being baptized? Because that's what the Bible teaches, right? So if you don't have faith, you don't have to say if a person doesn't have faith, but you don't have to put in there and is not baptized. Obviously, faith is essential. We didn't minimize the importance of it. We said that. We didn't minimize it. You have to have it. He says faith without works is dead, but man, works alone can't save you. So we were magnifying that. We weren't magnifying one over the other. We really weren't. Now, what we were talking about here is that all this stuff, and I'm glad Dave brought that up because it reminded me to make mention of this. This is all on us, right? Okay, this is all on us. We have to have faith and works. What do we call this? Grace. You see, God has provided a way for us to be saved. How did we get this? Well, through His death, burial, and resurrection. And Him sending us the truth. And so this is what we are supposed to do. He did His part. We better do our part. And a lot of people today will believe, well, just His part will do it for us. No. Grace alone can't save anybody. Because all grace is is just offering the gift. Yes, it's a free gift. It's a free gift with conditions. He said, well, if there's conditions, and you'll get this argument. If there's conditions, he'll say, well, then it wasn't really a gift. No. It's still a gift because it far outweighs what we can do. All right, we've got 10 minutes. We can at least introduce this next section that we'll talk about next week as we talk about the dangers of the tongue. And I know we all know how dangerous that is. So Janet, actually we started on Wednesday there. Warren, let's just go across here. Let's read 2 verses apiece of James chapter 3, going down through verse 12.
My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body.
Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which, though they be so great and are driven by fierce winds, yet they are turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. The tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell.
For every species of beasts and birds, of reptiles and creatures of the sea, is tamed, and has been tamed by the human race. But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison.
With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men. They have made it in the
Similitude.
Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things are not to be so.
Does the spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Does no spring yield both salt water and fresh?
Okay, so as you're winding down here, it almost seems like James is talking about forget it. There's nothing you can do about the tongue. But then he's closing up by saying, look, brethren, these things ought not to be so. You don't want to, out of the same mouth, blessings and cursings, right? You just can't get fresh water out of, how did he put it? Help me out here. Senior moment. Out of the same, there it is, verse 11. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter? That's the word bitter escaped. No, it's just not going to do that. It can't. Wow. Boy, James hasn't changed his line of discussion, has he? They got to go together. And now he comes on and says, well, now we're talking about things that you can't join them together. They can't proceed out of the same mouth. It's just not supposed to be that way. And so when we talk about the tongue here and how nobody can tame it. So is this a passage that justifies a foul mouth? Does it justify your foul mouth? Well, it says no man can tame it. Excuse me? But God can? Yeah. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You can learn to control the tongue is the point. We have to work hard at it is the point. And the reason is that we know that this is not a passage that justifies a foul mouth. We have Paul telling the Ephesian brethren, avoid filthy language, right? Foolish jesting. We are told so much about controlling the tongue in James chapter 1. What did he say in James chapter 1 about the tongue? Slow to speak. Slow to speak, right? So in other words, you can control this tongue. Be mindful of that. And so the fact that he says it's evil, the tongue can be evil and is evil, is telling me that, well, if it's something that I can't control, why are we calling it evil? Good point. It's like a person says, well, if I have to sin, why is there punishment? Right? If I have to sin, why is there punishment? Because I don't have to. It's the point. Because you're held accountable. You do not punish your child for something that was beyond their control. You just couldn't do it. I mean, Sawyer, take the refrigerator downstairs. You know, I mean, would you punish a child for something they physically cannot do? God is not going to punish anybody for something they physically cannot do. Spiritually, they cannot do. God's just not going to do that. And so when he's describing the tongue as how bad it is because man has decided to speak that way. And we need to see that. But we need to see how dangerous the tongue is. And so let's back up. He starts out with something right off the bat, which might seem kind of odd as he leads into this. But look what he said in verse 1. Let's see if we can get that one covered in 4 minutes. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing you shall receive a stricter judgment. Okay. We got over in Hebrews, the 5th chapter, condemning brethren for needing the first principles, and they should have been teachers by now. And here's James saying, let not many of you be teachers. How do you correlate the two? Well, first of all, not everybody is a public teacher. Not everybody can do that. Everybody's a private teacher. I mean, every one of you have taught privately. Maybe not the Bible, but you have been a teacher. Parents, have you been a teacher?
Yes.
You have been teaching your kids constantly. You do that. You instruct. We teach. And so on a private level, obviously you give an answer for the hope that's within us. We want to reach people with the gospel. So we are sharing the good news. But we need to focus on why shouldn't everybody, or what's so dangerous, as he mentions here, let not many of you become teachers, knowing you shall receive a stricter reward. What's James trying to drive home here, Dan?
I mean, it's because the influence that they have over what comes out of their mouth, being false teachings or,
I've told you guys this before. I don't know how many times. Could I not condition you as listeners? If I never preach against anything for 11 years, okay, and somebody gets in this pulpit and all of a sudden preaches against something, what are you going to think? Whoa, he's hard. He's a hard preacher. Or if I always, for 11 years, just preached against, it's stronger, and then somebody comes in and preaches a lesson on love, what do you think? He's soft. He's soft. You can condition listeners, which is very dangerous. Teachers have to be mindful of the influence that they have from the pulpit. Now, when he says this, does that mean that if I teach you error and you believe it, that you're not held accountable? Is that what he's saying?
No.
Why not?
You are held. I mean, we have to search the word.
That's right.
I mean, you have to. Yeah, I mean, we're told we need to search the word daily.
Well, Jesus talked about if you cause one of these little ones to stumble, better if the millstone were hung around your neck, right? So in other words, I can cause people to stumble. Now, a person might say, well, Chuck taught me wrong. That's true. Guess what? I'm holding him to a stricter. I'm holding him. But guess what? He told a lie. You believe it. Right. Okay, so there's accountability there. You can't blame somebody else, although somebody else, let's face it, Eve blamed who?
The serpent.
And so the serpent got off? No. Did Eve get off? No. See, in other words, God said, wow, serpent, you shouldn't have done that. But Eve, you shouldn't have listened. Right? So the same kind of thing. And so when he talked about a stricter judgment that is here, obviously because of the great influence that is there, the grave responsibility that we have to make sure that we don't preach our opinions, and knowing, and I hope that whoever gets in the pulpit here ever takes that seriously and doesn't take it lightly when it comes to teaching the Word. We're done. We'll start in verse 2, Lord willing, next Sunday morning. Thank you guys for your comments. I'll leave you to that. Okay, well, we're gonna try you. That we've never sung here before. Nobody else knows it.
Yeah, yeah. So
It doesn't matter. I just want to be.
I never seen you do anything like that. No, I never seen that.
Monday.
Yeah.
Yes,
Grandma.
Oh, that's right.